We're now going to hear a couple of short comments about what needs to be part of the Go Forward strategy. One of those voices is going to come from a leading funder in California on this kind of work, the California Endowment, and we have with us Craig Martinez, who is the program manager for neighborhoods. So the funder perspective. Craig, what's next? What should we be thinking about going forward?
Thank you, Tyler. I appreciate having the opportunity to speak to you all. And I know that you guys were just getting into the conversations. You're probably just about to figure all of it out when he called you back, so hopefully there'll be some time to have that conversation. First of all, it's an honor and a privilege to be here. I think I have one of the greatest jobs in the world in a lot of respects, because I get to sit around and listen to all the great ideas that you all are generating and thinking about all the great things, reflecting on the great things that you're teaching us all. And I think that one of the things I've obviously been asked to do is kind of reflect on what I've learned in the last couple of days and really kind of reflect back to you sort of the take-home takeaways for me. And then also I have a couple of challenges that I'd also like to issue. There are a number of smart people at the endowment that I was not part of that kind of created we talk about these drivers of change. We all get into these like logic models. They get really wonky and people get really like, so I'm not going to go through them, but it provides a very helpful perspective for me to be able to reflect back what I'm hearing from you all. The first thing is we really focus on power building. And what does that mean? That means talking to community members, asking them what they need to have more walkable communities, to be engaged in walking, fostering those everyday advocates. What are the skills? What are the technical expertise? What are the opportunities they need to be able to tell their stories? And more importantly, listening to them. And I think this is something that we've learned at the endowment. When you listen, you hear things that kind of become barriers, or you hear about barriers that you may not have thought about before. For example, in Watts, we talked to a number of community groups that are engaging in Safe Routes to Schools projects, and they're really saying kids are not walking to school, parents don't send their kids to school because they're afraid of crossing multiple gang territories. Sometimes there's violence on the streets and they have no safe havens to go. So we got to listen to those stories, and we got to think of creative ways to address them. The second piece is changing the narrative. I think we heard today that we really need to figure out a way to convey the emotion. How do we kind of put a face to the programs? A lot of the times we talk about, walkable communities and sidewalks and bike routes, but these are people. We're talking about people who we want. We don't create sidewalks just for sidewalks' sake. We create it so that people can use it. And I think we saw a lot of great stories today of how people are really engaging in that. And I think it's really critical that we bring those stories to light. We bring those stories about how there are particular barriers that prevent people from engaging in those type of activities. Also heard a lot about the power of collaboration. We work really hard to try to bring break down the silos and bring partners together, and I think that we heard that today, and I think you all have done a really great job in bringing together the business community, local elected officials, all the different players that have a role in this, and I think we need to continue to figure out how we partner. Unless we kind of figure out a way to work together, we're not gonna get any place, and we need to figure out how do we foster those champions in areas that typically are not supportive of walkable communities, or who may be supportive but have their own concerns, and how can we come together to address those. We talked a little bit about policies, but I think it's an important component of a lot of this work, and figuring out ways, how do we create opportunities to both, put, for us, a very important aspect is health, and how do we put health in planning? How do we think about health when it comes to transportation? How do we think about health when it comes to housing? And really putting that perspective, number one. Number two, how do we get resources to do this? Everyone knows that communities across the United States are strapped for cash. So how do we get resources to not only, we have a perspective of health in our comprehensive plans, our general plans, complete street policies, but where are we going to get the money to actually implement it? And unfortunately, there's a perception that we in the foundation world have all the infinite resources to be able to do this, but we don't. So we got to figure out a way that we can kind of put this, hardwire our communities, hardwire the policies to be able to create those opportunities. Finally, thinking about the power of data. And I know a lot of our great partners that we fund use data to be able to articulate, what's going on in our communities. What are pedestrian injuries? Those type of data is really sort of important in providing context. But again, to reflect back to the power building piece, we need to also have a face to that data. We need to make sure that people understand when you're talking about pedestrian injuries, that you're also talking about people's family members. You're talking about your neighbors, that you're putting a face to that. So it's not just this number that kind of exists in of itself, but it's part of a community. So those are my general reflections. I think that, I also have a few challenges, and I hear that I don't think they diverge too much from what we've already heard. But I think one of the things that we are very adamant about in the Endowment is that really focus on equity. And I think that that's really important when we're having this conversation. We want to make sure, we talk a lot about recreational walking. We talk a lot about walking to and from work or walking to and from transportation. We want to put a face to the everyday people that are actually engaging in walking. And we want to make sure that, especially in communities of color where there's very low resources, people don't own cars, people are having to use public transportations because they can't access affordable housing, or they're not able to access livable wages, jobs that have livable wages. Let's really make sure that we're sensitive to that, and we want to make sure that we're addressing those causes when thinking about solutions. I also want to challenge you all to tell us as funders what needs to be done. I think that there was a really interesting conversation we had, is that most funders aren't supporting capacity building. I feel very fortunate in the endowment we do that, but we don't do enough of it because there's just not enough resources. But if there are things in particular that we could be doing our jobs better in helping to create healthier communities, let us know. And that's an open invitation for myself, and I would say for the funders that are here, to have that conversation with us so we can identify solutions together. And finally, I think one of the groups that we have found are particularly powerful in this conversation and are not as present here as the young people. Young people can bring passion and energy and emotion and that coolness that us older people are not able to do. And I think that we really need to figure out a way to connect. And we actually have some of our great young people here that you'll hear from in a few. But just that's an energy that we have to capture, especially because we know that the millennials are no longer, they're less likely to have a driver's license. They're less likely to own a car. I live in LA, and if you had told me 10 years ago you would see kids walking the streets and biking and skateboarding, I'd be like, you got to be crazy. But this is the realities, and we have to figure out a way to tap into young people and have them help us be able to tell the stories of why walking and walkable communities is so important. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.